"Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins." The road to Velen was never kind, and on that damp evening, it was crueler than most. Rain fell in sheets, drumming on Geralt's hood and sliding down the neck of his armor. His mare, Roach, trudged through the mud with steady resignation, her hooves sucking at the earth with every step. The air smelled of rot and wet bark, the kind of smell that told tales of long decay and forgotten graves. Geralt had been riding since dawn, following the vaguest of rumors, a missing child, strange lights seen by night, and whispers of old magic stirring in the swamps. The alderman of a nearby village, a man named Derek, had sent for a witcher after 3 of his folk vanished near the bogs. No one who entered returned. Some said the ladies of the wood had awakened again, hungry for offerings not yet given. Geralt had heard that name before, ancient, older than the elves, tied to Velen's most twisted legends, witches, crones, spirits. No one agreed what they truly were, but their power was real, and their cruelty legendary. He reached the village of Mirkwater by nightfall, its huts huddled close together like frightened beasts. Smoke rose from thatched roofs, curling into the mist. A few villagers paused their work to stare as the witcher rode in, eyes wide with a mix of fear and desperate hope. Witchers were rare here. People prayed they'd never need one, but when they did, they clung to his presence as a drowning man clings to driftwood. At the tavern, a low, smoke-filled room with walls blackened by years of soot, Geralt found Derek. The alderman was a heavy-set man with a patchy beard and a look that spoke of sleepless nights. He poured Geralt a mug of ale before the witcher even asked. "Folk have been vanishing," Derek began, voice rough as gravel. "First a shepherd lad, then old Marta from the mill, then just yestermorn the smith's wife. Gone like smoke, all near the swamps, past the Barrow Hill." "Monsters?" Geralt asked, his tone even, eyes half-lidded but watchful.
"That's what we thought. Sent a few men to look. Found their packs and bones, stripped clean. But that ain't all. Found these." From beneath the table, Derek pulled a small bundle wrapped in cloth and set it down with shaking hands. Geralt unfolded it carefully. Inside lay a charm, a twisted knot of reeds and bone bound with a strand of human hair. Its shape was crude, yet deliberate, the kind of symbol meant to ward or bind. It reeked faintly of blood and herbs. Geralt frowned. "You found this where?" "Near the bodies, more like it hanging from the trees. Folks say it's the work of the witches of the swamp. Been here long before our grandfathers' grandfathers. We leave 'em offerings, bread, milk, flowers, to keep the peace. But this year, the crops failed. Some couldn't pay tribute. Maybe that's what angered 'em." The witcher studied the charm again, then tucked it away. "You say the missing were near the Barrow Hill?" "Aye, but no one dares go there now. There's a fog that don't lift, and voices whisper in it. Some claim they've seen lights, will-o'-wisps, or worse." Geralt stood, finishing his drink. "I'll go at first light."
Derek grabbed his arm. "Witcher, if what folks say is true, if the ladies are real, best you turn back. No sword can kill what lives in the swamps." Geralt looked at him then, the faintest flicker of something like weariness in his golden eyes. "Maybe not, but I'll try." That night, as the village slept behind shuttered windows, Geralt rested little. He sat by the hearth in the tavern, sharpening his silver sword until its edge caught the firelight like a line of moonlight. Outside, the wind moaned through the reeds, and the scent of the marsh drifted in through the cracks, wet, heavy, and old. Before dawn, he saddled Roach and rode out toward the mists. The forest around Velen was a maze of twisted trees and stagnant pools where frogs croaked and unseen things moved just beyond sight. Crows followed him, black wings flashing against the gray sky, their cries echoing like warnings. Hours passed before he reached the Barrow Hill. It rose from the marsh like an island crowned by ancient stones worn smooth by centuries. Strange symbols were carved into them, runes not of human hand. Geralt dismounted and knelt, brushing moss from one. He recognized fragments of elder speech, words of protection and sacrifice. Then he saw it, fresh footprints in the mud, small, bare, leading toward the heart of the swamp. A child's. Geralt's jaw tightened. He followed. The fog thickened, swallowing sound. The world shrank to the soft squelch of mud beneath his boots and the steady rhythm of his breath. Then came a whisper, soft, almost kind. White wolf. He froze, hand on the hilt of his sword. The voice came again, closer now, carried by the mist. White wolf, come closer. We've been waiting. 3 shapes emerged from the fog. They were tall, draped in rags and shadow, faces hidden save for gleaming eyes that seemed to know him. The air grew colder. The swamp fell silent. Geralt drew his sword, its silver edge whispering free. The tallest of the figures smiled. A witcher. How long it has been since one of your kind dared our woods. Geralt said nothing, only watched. His medallion trembled faintly against his chest. The second figure's voice was softer, yet colder still. You hunt monsters, do you not? Then perhaps you should ask yourself, what makes a monster? And as their laughter rippled through the fog like the cry of a dying bird, Geralt knew whatever haunted the Velen swamps was no mere rumor. It was ancient. It was hungry. And it was waiting. Morning came pale and cold, its light scarcely piercing the thick gray of the marshes. Mist curled like living breath across the still water, coiling around gnarled roots and half-sunken stones. Geralt moved through it in silence, the faint jingle of his sword belt and the squish of mud beneath his boots, the only sounds that marked his passing. The 3 figures who had appeared to him the night before had vanished when he stepped forward, swallowed by the fog as if they had never been. But the echo of their laughter lingered still, faint and mocking, in the hollow spaces of his mind. He walked until the sun was a dull smudge above the trees and found a cluster of ruined huts on a patch of higher ground. Their timbers were gray with rot, and black water pooled in the hollows where floors once stood. Crows perched on sagging roofs, watching him with unblinking eyes. One gave a rasping cry, then another, and they lifted as one in a flutter of wings that vanished into the mist. Geralt knelt beside a broken threshold, brushing aside reeds and mud. There, beneath the decay, he found a charm, like the one Derek had shown him, woven reeds bound with hair and bits of bone. But this one was fresh. It still reeked of blood. He held it a moment, studying the crude knotwork, then crushed it in his gloved hand. A faint pulse of energy shivered through his fingers. Old magic, foul and sticky, like the residue of a curse. Someone had renewed the witch's protection here, or perhaps called upon it. The ground nearby was disturbed, small prints Child's feet, bare and light, led toward the water's edge. Geralt followed them. At the bank, he found a small wooden figure lying half buried in the muck. A doll, its face painted crudely with soot and ash, one button eye missing. A chill crept down his spine, sharper than the morning cold. He heard the splash first, then the whisper, "White wolf!" Geralt turned, silver sword in hand. The water rippled, dark shapes shifting beneath its surface. A woman's pale arm broke through, dripping reeds and filth. Then another. From the shallows rose three shapes, hollow-eyed, their faces veiled with strands of wet hair. Drowners, he thought at first, but no, these were different. Their forms were human yet wrong, their limbs too long, their movements too graceful for corpses. The stench of death was faint, replaced by something older. Swamp musk and herbs, rot and perfume mingled. They stared at him without speaking, and then the one in the center smiled. "You seek the child?" she said, her voice like a reed flute, trembling and sweet. "The lost little lamb who wandered too deep." Geralt's grip tightened. "Where is she?" "She's safe for now," said the second, her hair as pale as milk. "She came to us crying, hungry and cold. We took her in, fed her. But gifts must be paid for." The Witcher's eyes narrowed. "You mean to keep her?" "Would you take her back to the village?" asked the third. Her voice was harsh and deep, full of scorn. "Back to hunger, to cruelty, to her mother's lies? No, Witcher, here she will never want." He took a step closer. "I've seen your kind's gifts. They come with a price." All three smiled then, and it was a terrible thing. "Then perhaps you should ask her mother what debt she owes." The witches sank back into the water and were gone, leaving only ripples that spread slowly outward. Geralt waited, blade ready, but the swamp fell silent once more. He sheathed his sword, his mind already turning. A bargain, they had said. The mother. Dark had mentioned the smith's wife among the missing, but there was another name he recalled, Lady Varnhilda, the noble woman who lived in the crumbling manor north of the marsh. Her son had fallen ill the previous year, stricken by a wasting sickness that no healer could cure. Rumor had it she had gone to desperate lengths to save him. Geralt mounted Roach and turned toward the manor. The road wound through waterlogged fields and over broken bridges, each more decayed than the last. By midday, he saw the manor rise from the fog, a dark silhouette of towers and sagging walls, its gardens overrun with bramble and vine. The gates hung open, rust streaking the iron like dried blood. Inside, he found silence. The grand hall was empty save for a fire that burned low in the hearth. A woman sat beside it, wrapped in a shawl of faded velvet, her hair streaked with gray, though she could not have been more than 30. Her eyes, when she turned them on him, were hollow as winter sky. "You are the Witcher," she said softly. "They told me one would come." "I'm looking for a child," Geralt said. "A girl taken by the witches of the swamp." The woman's hands trembled. "Then it's begun," she whispered. "I knew they would come to claim her." "Your daughter?" "No," she said, "not by blood, but she's mine in another way. I made a bargain to save my son. He was dying, and I went into the swamps, to the shrine. I offered what they asked." "What was that?" "My child," she said, voice breaking. "The child not yet born, but he died anyway. Fever took him before sunrise. I thought the pact broken. I was wrong." Geralt said nothing. The fire crackled. and for a long while the only sound was the whisper of the wind through the ruined hall. "They've come for what's owed," she continued at last. "For the life I promised. They took another's child in his stead, the little one from the village. Her name is Lena." Geralt's jaw tightened. "And if they're not stopped, they'll keep her until she grows old, or drain her of life long before. Their hunger is endless." He rose, adjusting his sword belt. "Then I'll see to it they go hungry." The woman reached out, clutching his sleeve. "Be careful, Witcher. The ladies cannot be slain as beasts can. They are bound to this land. Hurt one, and the swamp itself will rise against you." Geralt met her gaze. "Then I'll find another way." He left before dusk, the manor fading into mist behind him. As he rode, the wind carried faint laughter through the trees. High and distant, the sound of children at play. But there were no children in Velen's swamps. Only echoes and the witches waiting in the dark. The following dawn broke thin and wan, its light filtering through the tangled canopy like pale smoke. Geralt guided Roach along the overgrown track, leading back toward the marshes, the memory of Lady Varnhild's hollow eyes still lingering in his mind. The woman's confession had clarified much, and yet, as always, it left him with more questions than answers. A pact made in desperation, a bargain unfulfilled, and now a stolen child claimed by the witches as payment. He'd heard tales of such dealings before. The swamp witches of Velen, the ladies of the wood, were older than the villages that feared them. They did not hunger for gold or coin, but for bonds, for promises, for the thread of fate that bound one life to another. Their gifts came sweetly offered, healing, beauty, fertility, protection, but the price was always the same, life. Geralt's task was clear enough, but to face the witches head on, he needed knowledge, not steel. The silver sword could slay monsters of flesh, but not all things in the world were bound by that law. By noon, he reached an abandoned shrine on the edge of the marsh. 3 weathered figures carved from wood stood there, women with long hair and hollow eyes, their faces half consumed by moss. Offerings lay scattered about, wilted flowers, cracked eggs, bowls of curdled milk. The Witcher knelt beside the offerings, brushing aside leaves to reveal faint runes scratched into the base of the shrine. Old tongue, elder speech, though twisted and altered. The words spoke of dominion and debt, of power bound to the land. Each rune pulsed faintly under his fingers, alive with a residue of magic. He closed his eyes and murmured a short incantation, drawing upon a witcher's sign, Yrden. A violet glow shimmered in the damp air, tracing lines of power that bled outward from the shrine and into the swamp beyond. The witch's influence spread far indeed, woven into the very soil. Then faintly a whisper came to him through the magic, soft like wind through reeds. "Seek the heart, in the hollow beneath the hill." The voice faded, leaving only the rustle of wet leaves. Geralt stood, his expression grim. Beneath the hill, he had seen such a mound before, the barrow that rose from the swamp, like an island of stone. If there was truth to the voice, that was where he would find the witch's lair, or something that could lead him there. He mounted Roach once more and turned toward the barrow. The swamp deepened as he went. Pools of stagnant water reflected the gray sky. Reeds swayed like skeletal fingers. The ground sucked at Roach's hooves, and unseen creatures rippled beneath the surface. The air itself seemed to thicken, clinging to his skin, filled with the smell of damp moss and decay. At last, the hill appeared before him, its flanks wrapped in mist. Black stones jutted from its crown like broken teeth. Geralt dismounted and climbed the slope, each step sinking into soft, wet earth. At the top stood a circle of standing stones, their surfaces carved with the same sigils he had seen at the shrine. In the center yawned a hollow opening, half concealed by roots and creeping vines, a tunnel leading downward. He drew a torch from his pack, lit it, and descended. The air grew colder as he went. The tunnel twisted, narrowing until he had to stoop. The smell of rot and old blood filled the air. Bones littered the floor, animal at first, then human. He found a child's toy, broken and stained, dark with age, half buried in the dirt. When he emerged into a wide chamber, the torchlight flickered over carvings covering the walls, depictions of the witches themselves, surrounded by beasts and spirits of the swamp. Each of the three bore a different aspect. One young and fair, crowned with flowers, one matronly, cloaked in shadow, and one old and bent, her mouth open in laughter. Beneath them, mortals knelt in worship or in fear. At the chamber's center stood a stone altar. Upon it lay a heart, blackened and shriveled, bound by roots that pulsed faintly as though still alive. Geralt stepped closer, senses alert. Magic radiated from the thing, thick and foul. It was not human nor beast, but something between. A relic of the witch's power. He reached out, intending to sever the roots with his silver dagger. The air stirred. Touch it, Witcher, and your blood shall join theirs. The voice filled the chamber, echoing from every wall. Three shapes coalesced from the darkness, drifting like smoke. The witches again, their forms shifting between beauty and decay, youth and age. So the wolf comes hunting, crooned the eldest. He sniffs at what is ours. Geralt's eyes glowed faintly in the torchlight. You've taken a child. I've come to take her back. The middle sister tilted her head, lips curling. Ah, yes, the debt of the noble woman, the promise she thought forgotten. We do not forget, Witcher. We remember every oath, every cry whispered into the mud. You want a life, Geralt said. Take mine instead. The youngest laughed, the sound like glass breaking. A noble offer, but we have no need of your kind. You're marked already, cursed by steel and alchemy. Your soul's taste would sour our tongues. He drew his sword slowly, its silver edge flashing in the dim light. Then maybe I'll just cut the deal short. The chamber trembled. The witch's laughter grew louder, echoing until it seemed the earth itself mocked him. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sound ceased. You cannot kill what is bound to the land, hissed the eldest. Destroy the heart, and the swamp will drown your precious villages. Save the child, and another will be taken in her stead. Such is the weave of the world. Then I'll find a way to unweave it. The witches' forms flickered, their eyes burning brighter. Bold words, wolf. Seek the girl if you must. She wanders in the hollow reeds where the mist is thickest. But remember our warning. The swamp feeds on the blood of heroes. They vanished into mist, leaving the torch sputtering in the damp air. Geralt approached the altar once more, the black heart pulsing faintly. He did not touch it this time. Instead, he studied the carvings around it, tracing his fingers along the runes. He found what he sought, a binding phrase, a ritual of separation, dangerous but possible. He would need a focus, something of the child's, something of the witch's. and he would need to perform the rite before moonrise. He turned back toward the tunnel, his face set in grim determination. Somewhere out there, in the labyrinth of reeds and fog, a little girl was still alive, and the witches were waiting for him to come. The swamp seemed to close around him as he emerged into the daylight once more. The mist thickened, and every rustle, every ripple of water sounded like breath upon his neck. Geralt mounted Roach and rode toward the heart of the marsh, the girl's name echoing faintly in his thoughts. Lena. He would find her, or he would die in the attempt. The sun hung low and pale over the marshes when Geralt reached the hollow reeds where the witches had said the child wandered. Mist drifted thick as wool, muting sound and color alike, until even Roach's outline seemed to fade and blur. The mare grew uneasy, ears flicking, nostrils flaring as she snorted against the damp air. The Witcher dismounted, his boots sinking into black mud that sucked greedily at his steps. The silence was unnatural here. No frogs croaked, no insects hummed. The world felt suspended, as if the swamp itself were holding its breath. Geralt's medallion trembled faintly against his chest. Something powerful stirred nearby, though distant enough not to reveal itself. He drew a slow breath and began to move forward, every sense sharpened. A witcher's life was a string of such moments, half light and uncertainty, the taste of danger thick on the tongue. He had faced curses, specters, and worse, yet there was something about the Velen marshes that unsettled him more deeply than most. It was not the fear of death, it was the feeling that the land itself was alive and watching. The reeds whispered softly, shifting without wind. He crouched, eyes narrowing, and saw a small footprint pressed into the mud, then another and another leading deeper into the haze. Bare feet, small ones, the girl's trail. He followed it carefully, his hand resting on the hilt of his steel sword, though he doubted steel would help him here. The prince wove between patches of stagnant water and vanished where the ground gave way to a dark pool. Across the water he caught a glimmer, a faint wavering light. He whispered a sign, Ard, sending a pulse of air rippling across the surface. The light flickered but did not vanish. It was no will-o-wisp, no trick of the swamp. It was a lantern. He crossed the pool, wading waist-deep through the chill water until he reached the other side. The lantern hung from a twisted branch, its flame guttering blue. Beneath it sat a little girl. She could not have been more than 7. Her hair was tangled with reeds, her dress soaked and torn, her small face pale as moonlight, yet she did not seem frightened. She turned her wide eyes toward him, calm, as if she had been expecting him. "You came?" she said softly. "The ladies told me you would." Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. "You're Lena?" She nodded, clutching a small wooden doll to her chest. It was the same one he had found earlier, though here it looked whole again, freshly carved and painted. "They said you would take me home," she continued. He knelt beside her. "Do you want to go home?" The girl hesitated. "Mama cries for me. I hear her sometimes in the wind. But the lady said if I leave, the swamp will be angry. They said I belong here now." "Did they hurt you?" She shook her head. "They're kind. They sing songs.
They said they'd make me strong, like them." Geralt's jaw tightened. He knew the pattern too well. Gentle voices, fair promises, the lure of protection offered by monsters who fed on fear and innocence alike. "Lena," he said quietly, "do you still have something from your mother? Something you wore or carried?" The girl frowned, thinking. Then she reached into the pocket of her tattered dress and pulled out a small silver pendant, tarnished but intact, a charm shaped like a star. "She gave me this before I got sick," Lena murmured. "Said it would keep me safe." "Good," Geralt said, taking it gently. "Hold on to that feeling, little one. Your mother's love, it's stronger than any promise the swamp can make." He stood, glancing toward the mist beyond. "We have to go. Now." But the air shifted, heavy, slow, full of whispering voices. The mist coiled and thickened until shapes began to form within it, tall, twisted silhouettes that moved with the languid grace of sleepwalkers. The witches. They stepped from the fog, 3 in number as before, each one both familiar and different. The maiden's face was lovely, though her skin glistened like wet bark. The matron's form wavered between beauty and decay. The crone's mouth split in a grin too wide for any human face. "She is ours," hissed the eldest, her voice deep as the roots of trees. "Born of promise, bound by word. You have no claim, Witcher." "Her mother's claim outweighs yours," Geralt said. "Your pact was made in deceit." "Deceit?" The maiden laughed, sweet and cruel. "She came to us willingly. She asked for her son's life and offered her next-born in return. We kept our end. Her son lived 3 days longer than fate allowed." The child shrank back, clutching her doll tighter. Geralt stepped between her and the witches. "You twist your words like snakes twist through grass. I've seen your kind feed on sorrow. You will not feed on this one." The witches' forms darkened, their eyes flaring red. "Then you will join the bones beneath our waters." The air trembled, mud bubbled, and from the pools around them rose a horde of creatures, half-rotted things with the bodies of men and the faces of beasts. Water hags, drowners, things older still, bound to the witch's will. Geralt's sword flashed free. "Stay behind me, Lena," he said, his voice low but steady. The first drowner lunged. He met it with a clean arc of silver, the blade cleaving through flesh and bone. Black blood splattered the reeds. A second came from the side, claws reaching. He spun, cutting low, severing its legs before driving the point through its skull. They came faster. He moved through them like a storm, precise, relentless, every motion the product of training older than the monsters themselves. Yet for everyone he felled, 2 more crawled from the mire. He traced the sign of Igni, sending a burst of fire that roared across the water, consuming the nearest beasts in flame. The witches shrieked, their forms wavering. "You think to burn the swamp?" cried the matron. "It will drown you." A wave of dark water rose from nowhere, crashing down upon him. The torchlight vanished. The cold hit like a blow, dragging him under. He fought to rise, choking on the taste of silt and rot. Through the murk he saw shapes swirling, faces, hands, bones. The witch's laughter filled his head, deafening. Then a faint glimmer, Lena's pendant, shining silver beneath the water. He reached for it, grasped it tight. The light spread, growing brighter, pushing back the darkness. He broke the surface, gasping. The witches recoiled, their power faltering. The light burned them as if it were sunlight. Geralt rose from the water, breathing hard. "Your magic feeds on fear," he said. "She's not afraid anymore." The child stood behind him, clutching her pendant, its glow steady and pure. The witches shrieked and dissolved into mist, their forms scattering into the fog until only silence remained. The swamp lay still once more. Geralt turned to Lena. "Come, let's go home."
She took his hand, small and cold, and together they began the long walk back toward the edge of the marsh. Behind them the mist closed again, swallowing all trace of what had passed. But as they left that cursed place, Geralt could not shake the feeling that the witch's laughter still echoed faintly in the wind. Soft, distant, patient. The ladies of the wood were beaten, not slain, and debts, he knew, were never truly forgotten in Velen. The morning after the battle dawned still and gray. A low fog blanketed the marshes, hiding the scars of the night beneath its quiet shroud. Geralt and Lena walked slowly along the narrow track that wound between pools of stagnant water, each step sinking into the sodden ground. Roach followed behind, her reins looped loosely over the witcher's arm. Lena had not spoken since the witch's vanishing. She held her mother's pendant close, her small fingers white around it. Her eyes, wide and glassy, reflected the pale light, seeing little of the world around her. Geralt did not press her to speak. He knew that silence, the stunned quiet that followed terror. There were no words that could mend such things quickly. As they left the marsh's deepest part, the fog began to lift. Birds called somewhere far off, tentative at first, then louder, as if the land itself dared to breathe again. Even so, the Witcher felt no triumph. The witches had been driven back, but not destroyed. Their roots were sunk too deep into this place. Their power would stir again sooner or later. By midday, they reached the edge of the bog where the path firmed beneath their feet. Beyond lay fields, gone to ruin, crooked fences, blackened stalks, and huts crouching beneath the weight of damp thatch. Murkwater lay not far off now, its crooked chimneys rising faintly in the mist. Lena finally spoke. "Will they come for me again?" Geralt looked down at her. "Not while I'm here." The girl nodded, though doubt shadowed her face. "They said they'd never forget." "They don't?" Geralt admitted. "But forgetting isn't the same as finding. The swamp has lost you. That will keep you safe for a while." She said nothing more, though she stayed close to his side as they entered the village. Word spread fast. Before long, faces peered from doorways, whispering. When the alderman saw them, he hurried forward, his lined face breaking into disbelief. "By the gods," Derek breathed. "You found her?" Lena ran to him, clutching at his cloak. The man bent, lifting her easily in his arms. "Child, we thought you dead. The whole village prayed." Geralt watched them quietly. After a moment, Derek turned to him, eyes glistening. "Witcher, I don't know how to thank you. The lady's blessings upon—" "Don't," Geralt cut in, his tone calm but sharp. "No blessings. The ladies of the wood aren't gods to be thanked. Burn every offering, every charm. Don't feed their power again." The alderman's expression darkened. "But if we anger them—" "They're already angry," Geralt said. "They always are. Better to face their wrath once than live in fear forever." Derek swallowed hard and nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. Fear ran deep in Velen, as old as the soil itself. Lena's mother arrived soon after, a thin woman with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. When she saw her daughter, she fell to her knees, sobbing, clutching the child as though afraid she might vanish again. Geralt turned away, giving them their moment. He walked toward the tavern, the weight of fatigue settling into his limbs. The fight had drained him, body and mind alike. Inside, the room was dim and warm, smelling of smoke and ale. He ordered food, sat by the fire, and ate in silence. When he finished, the alderman joined him once more, carrying a small pouch of coin. For your work, he said, setting it on the table. Geralt glanced at it but did not move to take it. Keep it. Use it to mend the village, Derek frowned. You'll take no payment. I've been paid, Geralt said quietly, eyes on the flames. The girl's alive. He stood and left before the alderman could protest. Outside, the air was heavy with the smell of rain. He saddled Roach and rode toward the manor. Lady Varnhild would need to know what had happened. He doubted she would find comfort in it, but truth was, a blade best delivered clean. The manor loomed silent as before, its stone walls streaked with damp, ivy creeping up the sides. He found her in the same hall, sitting before a fire gone low. When she looked up, her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale with exhaustion. She lives? She asked, voice no more than a whisper. She does, Geralt said. The witches have retreated. For now. Her gaze fell to the hearth. Then it's done? The debt paid? No, Geralt said. Debts like that don't end. You made a bargain with them, and that stain doesn't wash off easily. She closed her eyes. I know. Every night I hear them whisper. They say they will come again, not for me, but for my bloodline. I have no children left, but perhaps they will find some trace, some kin. The swamp doesn't forget. Geralt said nothing. The fire crackled softly, throwing shadows across her hollow face. Do you think there's forgiveness for what I did? She asked. He met her eyes, his own unreadable. Not from them, maybe from yourself, if you're strong enough. She gave a small, broken laugh. Strength is a witcher's gift, not mine. Strength comes in different forms, he said. Yours is still to be found. He left her there, staring into the fire, her hands clasped in her lap. Outside, the sky had darkened. A soft drizzle began to fall, whispering across the overgrown gardens. Geralt mounted Roach and turned down the road that led away from the manor, away from Mirkwater. He had no further place here. The swamp would heal or fester on its own. Yet even as he rode, unease lingered. The witch's words echoed in his mind. The swamp feeds on the blood of heroes. Night came quickly. He made camp by a stream that wound through the woods, far from the village. The rain hissed softly in the grass, and the fire he built sputtered low. Roach grazed nearby, ears twitching at the sound of distant frogs. Geralt sat with his back against a tree, sword across his knees. His thoughts wandered, not to the witches now, nor to the curse that clung to Velen, but to the child's face. When she had looked at him in the fog, the calm in her eyes had not been human calm. It had been something learned, something given. He frowned. The witches had touched her deeply. He had seen it before, how their power seeped into those they claimed. It would fade, perhaps, but not entirely. Part of them would live on in her, quiet for now, waiting. The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint scent, wet earth and lilac, a whisper of perfume too out of place to belong in the swamp. His medallion quivered once, then stilled. Geralt stared into the fire. The witches might have been beaten, but their reach was long. In Velen, nothing ever truly ended. He leaned back, eyes half-lidded. The rain grew heavier, the fire dimmer. Above him, clouds gathered thick and dark. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled, a low, rolling sound like laughter carried on the wind. The witcher said nothing. He only watched the flames flicker and fade, knowing that dawn would bring another road, another hunt, another story in a world where monsters never slept for long. For now, though, he rested, and far behind him, in the heart of the swamp, 3 voices whispered softly in the dark, not defeated, only waiting. 2 weeks passed before Geralt returned to Velen's borderlands. The path through the forests was muddy, the air thick with the scent of autumn rot and smoke from distant villages burning their harvest chaff. He had thought to leave the swamps behind him for good, but work, as ever, had its own way of circling back. A messenger from Crow's Perch had found him at an inn on the Pontar's bank, a young soldier with more fear than wit, stammering out his orders. Baron Strenger had sent for him again. Something foul stirred in the marshes, he said. Cattle gone missing, travelers vanishing. The Baron's scouts found strange marks carved into trees, runes like claws. Geralt had listened in silence. The Baron's coin was good, but the words that mattered weren't those of the messenger. They were the ones unspoken. The witches were moving again. Now, as he neared the lands of Crow's Perch, the sky darkened with low clouds. Roach plodded onward, steady and unbothered by the drizzle. Ahead, the Baron's fort rose above the rolling fields, its wooden palisades stark against the pale horizon. Inside the courtyard was a chaos of movement, soldiers sharpening blades, servants loading wagons. The Baron himself stood at the gate, his broad shoulders hunched, a red cloak hanging heavy from the rain. When he saw the Witcher, he waved him over. "Geralt of Rivia," the Baron said, voice deep and rough as gravel. "I'd hoped never to see your pale eyes again." Geralt dismounted. The feeling's mutual. "What's happened?" The Baron's mouth twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Men gone missing, beasts prowling too close. Same old tale, but this time the ones who vanish come back. Sort of. Walking corpses, faces twisted, black veins down their necks. They speak, but the words aren't theirs." "Cursed," Geralt said simply. "That's my guess. But the priest we brought from Oxenfurt said it was no curse he knew. He tried a blessing, poor sod." The thing laughed at him till it tore his throat out. Geralt nodded. "Where?" "Out near the peat bogs. You know the place, half a day's ride south. I'd send men, but..." The Baron spat to the side. "Men are no use against such filth. I need a witcher's trade." Geralt considered. "The bogs again. Always the bogs. You'll have your answer by tomorrow." The Baron grunted. "If you come back alive." He left the fort before dawn, mist clinging to the ground like spilled milk. The road wound through thickets of alder and ash, their branches bare. By midday he reached the bogs. The land here was desolate, no birds, no tracks, only the smell of stagnant water and decay. As he dismounted, something shifted at the edge of his vision, a figure, pale and thin, half hidden by the fog. It watched him from afar, unmoving. He took a step forward, and it melted into the mist. Geralt crouched, examining the ground. Footprints, bare, sunken deep into the mud, leading toward the ruins of an old mill. The air grew colder as he followed. Inside the ruin, he found the remnants of a campfire, a few scattered tools, and blood, dark, dried, and human. Near the hearth, a corpse slumped against the wall, its face unrecognizable, the flesh drawn tight and gray. The stench of rot and sorcery was unmistakable. He touched the medallion at his neck. It trembled violently. Magic, strong, ancient, and familiar. A whisper slid through the air. "White Wolf, back again." He turned sharply, sword drawn, but there was nothing there, only the fog. Then from the corner of the ruin, the corpse stirred. Its fingers twitched, its head jerked upright, eyes burning with unnatural light. When it spoke, the voice was not its own. "You thought us gone." Geralt's eyes narrowed. You should have stayed buried. The corpse rose, moving with jerks and spasms like a puppet pulled by unseen strings. Its voice shifted, layered with 3 tones, the voices of the witches. We cannot die, Witcher. The swamp is our body, the mud our blood. Strike us down, and we rise again from the mire. Geralt circled, blade ready. You want something. What is it? A wet laugh bubbled from the creature's lips. The girl. The promised child. You think you freed her, but she is bound still. She hears our song in her dreams. Lena. The realization struck him like a blade to the gut. He had left her behind believing her safe, but the witch's reach was not bound by distance. You'll not touch her, he said. Already she comes to us, the voices purred. Her steps lead her back to the swamp. When the moon bleeds, she will be ours again. Geralt lunged, sword flashing. The silver edge bit deep into the creature's neck, severing it in one clean stroke. The head fell, yet the mouth still smiled. Come to the hollow, wolf. Come see how the story ends. The body collapsed, lifeless once more. Geralt wiped his blade, though the act felt hollow. He knew a summons when he heard one. The witches wanted him to follow, and sooner or later he would. He buried the corpse outside the mill, muttering a few words in elder speech to seal it against further desecration. Then he mounted Roach and turned north. By the time he reached Murkwater, dusk had fallen. The village was quiet, too quiet. He dismounted before the alderman's house, where a single candle flickered behind drawn shutters. He knocked once, no answer. Twice, still silence. He pushed the door open. Inside, the hearth burned low, casting long shadows. Derek sat slumped at the table, his head in his hands. When he looked up, his face was ashen. She's gone, he rasped. Geralt's stomach sank. When? Last night. Said she heard singing from the woods. Thought it was her mother calling. We found her tracks. Led straight toward the marsh. Then they stopped. The Witcher closed his eyes briefly, cursing under his breath. He had known it wasn't finished, but he had hoped, foolishly, that the witch's reach might falter. Get everyone inside, he said. Lock the doors. Light fires in every hearth. Whatever happens tonight, don't step outside. Derek swallowed hard. You'll go after her? Geralt nodded. Aye, and this time I end it. He left without another word. Outside, the mist had thickened once more, curling low over the ground like breath. The wind carried a faint sound, distant, lilting, the echo of a child's song. Roach stamped nervously, ears flat. Geralt mounted and rode toward the sound. The path wound through the reeds, the darkness deepening with each step. The air grew heavy, the smell of the swamp returning like a memory of something long dead. And somewhere ahead, beneath the whispering willows, he saw a faint light, a lantern. Just as before, but this time he knew it was bait. He drew his sword, silver gleaming faintly in the murk. All right, he murmured to the mist. Let's finish this. The swamp answered with laughter, 3 voices rising and falling like the croak of frogs, old and cruel. The hunt had begun again. The mist thickened as Geralt rode deeper into the bog, curling around the trunks of drowned trees and drifting low over the water. The lantern's light ahead flickered, wan and uncertain, swaying like a will-o-wisp. Roach snorted, tossing her head in protest, but the Witcher pressed her onward. He knew the game now. The witches wanted him to follow, and he would. The reeds rustled softly in the wind. Once or twice he glimpsed shapes moving among them, pale and quick. Drowners, perhaps, or something worse. His medallion vibrated faintly, the faint hum of nearby magic pulsing against his chest. The lantern led him to a causeway of broken stones, half sunk in the mud. Beyond it rose the dark outline of the Barrow Hill. It looked different than before, taller, darker, as if it had grown since last he stood upon it. A faint red glow seeped from the roots at its base, pulsing like the beat of a heart. He dismounted and drew his sword. The swamp was silent save for the distant drip of water and the slow creak of the reeds. No frogs, no birds. Even the insects had fled. "Come, wolf," a voice whispered, soft as a sigh. "You've come so far. Don't falter now." The witch's laughter followed, drifting through the fog like wind through dead leaves. He climbed the hill. The stones around its crown were slick with moss and dark with blood. Some of the symbols had been recarved, new lines gouged deep into the rock, filled with a tar-black substance that glimmered in the dim light. At the summit, he saw a figure standing before the barrow's hollow, a child's silhouette, lantern in hand. Lena. She turned at the sound of his voice. The light revealed her face, pale, streaked with mud, her eyes wide and distant. "Geralt," she whispered, "they said you would come. They said you'd help me." "I will," he said, lowering his sword a fraction. "Come to me, we'll go home." She shook her head slowly. "I can't. They're here. They're waiting." The ground trembled underfoot. Cracks split the soil, releasing foul vapors that stung his nose. The lantern's flame flared bright, then went out. Out of the darkness stepped the witches. The maiden first, fair and terrible, her beauty like a knife's edge. The matron next, her heavy frame draped in rotting silks. And last came the crone, her spine bent, her grin stretching ear to ear. "You brought the wolf to heal," the crone crooned, stroking Lena's hair with a hand of withered fingers. "How faithful he is, how foolish." Geralt raised his sword again, the silver glinting coldly. "Let her go." "She's ours by right," said the matron. "A debt must be paid, and this one carries the mark." "She carries nothing," Geralt said. "You tricked her mother, you twisted the bargain." "Twisted?" The maiden's eyes flashed. "We gave what was asked. We healed the boy for 3 days, 3 whole days. His mother's heart beat with hope again. That was our gift. Hope always has a price." Geralt took a step forward. "Then take me." Their laughter rolled like thunder. "You offer yourself so easily," the crone said, her voice rasping. "But your life is not yours to give. You belong to fate, to the path. No, this one is promised." Lena began to hum softly, her voice distant, trance-like. The witches swayed in time with her tune. The air grew thick with the smell of blood and herbs, and red light pooled at their feet. The hill shuddered, stones splitting. Beneath them something vast moved, roots writhing like serpents, reaching for the surface. Geralt drew the sign of Írden, slamming it into the earth. Violet energy flared outward, forming a circle around him and the child. The witches recoiled, hissing, their forms flickering between shadow and substance. "You think your glyphs can bind us?" snarled the matron. "We are the land. We are the swamp's breath, its hunger, its heart." The ground split open with a roar, and from it rose a figure of mud and bone, towering over them, a grotesque idol come to life, its body stitched from the remains of beasts and men. Its eyes burned with green fire, its voice a rumble that shook the air. "Defend our heart," the witches commanded. "Tear the wolf apart." The creature lunged. Geralt met it head-on. His blade flashed, silver sparking against wet flesh. The monster's strength was immense,
each blow drove him back, his boots skidding in the mud. He dodged a clawed hand, rolled beneath it, and drove his sword into the beast's flank. The blade sank deep, but met no bone, only mire. The creature roared, striking him aside. Pain lanced through his ribs as he hit the stones. His medallion thrummed violently, warning of magic, power swelling from the barrow's depths. The witches chanted louder, their voices weaving in 3 tones that merged into one terrible harmony. The idol's wounds closed. The runes on the stones blazed red. Geralt forced himself upright, blood on his lips. He needed to end this, cut the thread of power that bound the witches to the land. He reached into his satchel and drew out the small heartstone he had taken from their altar weeks ago. It pulsed faintly in his palm, echoing the beat of the barrow below. He hurled it into the pit from which the idol had risen. For a heartbeat, the world went still. Then light erupted, white and blinding. The witches screamed. Their forms split and twisted, the harmony of their voices breaking into discord. The idol froze mid-strike, cracks racing across its body. "Fool!" the maiden shrieked. "You unmake the balance! The swamp will drown in blood!" "Then drown with it," Geralt growled. The heartstone exploded. The barrow collapsed inward, swallowing the idol in a torrent of mud and fire. The witches' cries faded into the roar of earth and water. When the noise finally died, only the wind remained. Geralt lay on the slope, chest heaving. The air smelled of rain and smoke. The red glow had vanished. Beside him, Lena stirred. "Is it over?" she whispered. He looked toward the pit. Where the barrow had been, there was now only a pool of dark water, still and silent. "For now," he said. She leaned against him, exhausted. "I heard them screaming," she said softly. "Then it was quiet. I think they're gone." "Let's hope so." He lifted her into the saddle and mounted behind her. Roach whickered softly, eager to leave the cursed ground. As they rode back through the marsh, the mist began to thin. The frogs started their low croaking once more. Life returned, hesitantly, as though testing the air. When they reached dry land, Lena looked up at him. "Will they come back?" Geralt's gaze stayed on the horizon. "Monsters always do, but when they do, there'll be someone to stop them." She was quiet for a time, then said, "You mean you?" He didn't answer. Behind them, far across the bog, the water rippled once, then stilled. A faint whisper drifted through the wind, so soft it could have been imagined. "White wolf, the swamp remembers." Geralt urged Roach forward. The path ahead was long and dawn was breaking. The road from Velen to the north wound through low hills and forests, drenched in mist. For 3 days Geralt rode in silence, the child asleep in his arms or clinging to his cloak. When they finally reached the outskirts of Crow's Perch again, autumn sunlight was breaking through the haze. The air was cool and smelled of wet leaves and smoke, the kind of smell that spoke of endings. Lena had grown quieter since the barrow's fall. She no longer trembled at the shadows, but her eyes had changed, darker now, deep with something he could not name. Sometimes when she thought he wasn't looking, she would hum softly to herself, the faint echo of a tune he had heard once in the witch's domain. It made the hair at the back of his neck rise every time. The Baron's men at the gate straightened when they saw him, but none dared speak. Word of the Witcher's return always spread faster than fire in dry grass. Inside the keep was a clamor of dogs and voices. The Baron himself met them in the courtyard, cloak thrown over his shoulder, a mug of ale in one hand. "By the bloody gods,"
he said, eyes widening when he saw the girl. You found her again? Geralt dismounted, setting Lena gently on the ground. She's alive, but the swamp's power still stirs. I ended the witch's hold on the land, at least for now. The Baron eyed the girl uneasily. And her? She ain't cursed? Geralt hesitated. No curse, but she's marked by what she's seen. Keep her safe. Keep her away from the bog. The Baron spat into the dirt. Aye, I'll see to that, and you'll have your pay, Witcher. Geralt waved the offer away. Give it to the village. They'll need it. The Baron's brows drew together. You've a strange habit of leaving gold behind. Maybe, Geralt said, turning to leave, but coin won't buy peace in that swamp. He took his leave soon after, the road calling to him once more. The path never waited. There was always another cry for help, another monster in the dark. Yet even as the keep faded behind him, something about Velen refused to let go. That night he camped by a stream, a league beyond the Baron's lands. The moon was high, bright as polished bone. He cleaned his swords by the fire, the metal gleaming in the orange glow. Roach grazed nearby, calm and steady as ever. Sleep came slowly. When it did, it came heavy. He dreamed of water, black and endless. The surface rippled, and from its depths rose the witches, their faces pale as death. The maiden smiled, her eyes empty. You broke the heart, but not the bond, she whispered. The girl is ours still. When the moon bleeds, we shall rise again. He woke with a start, hand on his sword. The fire had burned low, embers glowing faintly. The night was silent, save for the slow creak of trees. He sat for a long while, eyes on the dying coals. He had fought the witches, broken their altar, torn their power from the earth. But dreams had a way of speaking truths the waking mind feared. If they still reached for Lena through her sleep, their tether had not been severed. At dawn, he turned back toward Mirkwater. The journey took a day and a night. When he arrived, the village was quiet, smoke curling lazily from a few chimneys. The fields lay bare, stubble glistening with frost. He found Derek by the well mending a net. The alderman looked up, startled. Witcher, thought you'd gone for good. I had. Now I'm back. Derek wiped his hands on his tunic. What brings you here? Where's the girl? The man's expression darkened. Lena? She's at the manor with Lady Varnhild. Said the noblewoman took her in after you left. Better roof there than any hut here. Geralt frowned. When? 3 days past. The lady came herself, said she owed the child a debt. Who was I to argue? The girl went with her quiet as a lamb. He turned his gaze toward the forest that hid the manor's silhouette. A chill prickled the back of his neck. Keep your folk inside tonight, he said. Bolt your doors. He found the manor cloaked in fog, its towers black against the dimming sky. No birds sang here. The iron gates stood open, creaking softly on their hinges. Inside, the courtyard was empty, save for a few scattered leaves and the echo of distant voices. He dismounted, sword loose in his hand, and stepped through the grand doorway. The hall was as he remembered it. Cold stone, long shadows, the smell of old incense. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting the faintest light. Lady Varnhilda stood before it, tall and still, her hands resting on the shoulders of the girl who stood at her feet. Lena. The child turned at his approach. Her eyes were glassy, her expression serene. Too serene. Witcher, the lady said, her voice distant, you return to witness redemption. Geralt's grip tightened on his sword. Where is the real Lady Varnhilda? A smile flickered across her face, wrong and knowing. She is here. She is us.
We are she. The air thickened. Shadows spilled from the corners of the hall, coiling like smoke. 3 voices spoke in unison. We told you the swamp remembers. Geralt moved. His blade flashed, cleaving through the air, striking the apparition, but it passed through her like mist. The fire guttered. The child's laughter rang out high and cold. The witch's forms took shape again, rising behind the lady's body, transparent but solid enough to be seen. Did you think we were gone, wolf? Hissed the crone. We do not die. We take new flesh when old rots away. You bound yourselves to her, Geralt said, voice low, to the woman who made the pact. The maiden nodded. She was empty, ripe for the taking. Through her we walk again. Through the child we shall be reborn. Lena stood motionless, the silver pendant gleaming at her throat. Geralt's medallion shivered violently. Power pulsed from the child like heat. He whispered, a sign, Ard, and sent a blast of air through the hall. The fire burst outward, scattering the shadows. The witches shrieked, their forms wavering. Lady Varnhilda stumbled back, clutching her head. Lena, Geralt shouted, throw the pendant into the fire. The girl hesitated, tears streaking her cheeks. They're inside me, she whispered. They won't let go. Fight them, he said, stepping closer. You're stronger than they are. It's your life, not theirs. The witch's laughter rose to a shriek. The matron's voice thundered through the hall. You cannot sever what blood has bound. Geralt raised his sword, tracing a circle with its point, murmuring the words of an ancient exorcism he had learned long ago. Old magic, dangerous and half forgotten. The runes on his blade flared silver. The witches howled as the circle closed around them. Lady Varnhilda fell to her knees, screaming. Lena's pendant blazed with light. The fire roared higher, feeding on something unseen. Geralt pressed forward, voice steady despite the strain. By steel and sign, by blood and breath, be gone. With a final cry, the witch's forms shattered like glass. The wind howled through the manor, snuffing the fire in an instant. Silence fell. When the smoke cleared, Lady Varnhild lay motionless on the floor, her face peaceful for the first time in years. Lena knelt beside her, clutching the dimmed pendant. She's gone, the girl whispered. Geralt nodded. Aye, and so are they. He sheathed his sword. The hall smelled of ashes and rain. Outside, dawn had begun to break. Pale light filtered through the trees, glinting off the wet leaves. The swamp, at last, was quiet. As they stepped out into the morning air, Lena took his hand. What will happen now? He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Now, he said, you live. The wind stirred the reeds beyond the manor walls, carrying away the last whisper of voices that had haunted Velen for centuries. And somewhere deep in the marsh, beneath still waters, something ancient sighed and slept. For a time, peace lingered in Velen. The mists that had once crept through the fields at dawn thinned, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke and harvest rather than decay. Mirkwater's folk rebuilt their homes and dared to laugh again. Yet though the sun returned to the skies, Geralt of Rivia knew too well that in this land, peace was but a brief guest, soon chased away by darker company. He stayed in Velen longer than he intended. The child needed time. Lena spoke little, but each day she seemed a little less haunted, her steps lighter, her laughter no longer edged with that eerie calm the witches had left behind. Lady Varnhilda's manor became her home. The villagers saw to her care, though they crossed themselves each time they passed her in the lane, whispering that the witcher had brought back a child touched by the swamp.
Geralt ignored their murmurs. He had heard worse, and besides, he knew they were not entirely wrong. He made camp in the woods nearby, returning each day to check on the girl. It was not in his nature to linger, but something bound him here. A duty unfinished, a shadow he could not name. He told himself it was caution, that he only wished to be certain the witch's curse had been broken. Yet deep down he felt something else, a foreboding, faint but constant, like the echo of a storm over the horizon. One night the storm arrived. The first sign came with the wind. It rose suddenly at dusk, sweeping through the trees, cold and sharp as if it had blown from the grave. The animals stirred restlessly. Roach stamped and snorted, tossing her head. Geralt felt his medallion begin to vibrate faintly. He rose, listening. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Then he heard it, a whisper, faint as breath, curling through the dark. "White Wolf." He turned toward the sound. The voice came from the direction of the manor. In moments he was astride Roach, riding hard. The road was little more than a ribbon of mud in the moonlight, but he knew it by heart. Lightning flashed far off, illuminating the land in silver. When he reached the gates, they stood open, banging against their hinges in the wind. The courtyard was empty, the torches extinguished. The manor loomed silent. Geralt dismounted, drew his sword, and entered. The smell hit him first, blood and burnt herbs. Then he saw the trail, dark stains leading across the floor, smudged footprints small as a child's. He followed them down the corridor to the main hall. Lena stood before the cold hearth. Her hair hung loose, her dress torn, her hands slick with blood. Her eyes were wide and unblinking. "They came," she whispered. "They called me again." Geralt stepped forward slowly, sword still in hand. "Lena, what happened?" She pointed to the floor. Lady Varnhilda lay there, her throat cut cleanly. Around her body 3 symbols had been drawn in blood, the same sigils that once marked the barrow stones. "They said she had to pay," the girl said, her voice breaking. "They said the debt wasn't done." Geralt felt the old anger stir in him, cold and sharp. "The witches are gone. They can't reach you now." "They never left," Lena whispered. "They're inside me." Her eyes rolled white and she screamed, a sound that made the walls tremble. The candles flared to life, burning green. The air filled with whispers, a chorus of voices, speaking in tongues too old for men to remember. "Did you think to banish us?" The voices hissed. "We live where the heart remembers. The child is ours, the vessel reborn." Geralt's medallion thrummed violently. He backed away, drawing a sign of Yrden with his left hand, forming a shimmering circle of violet light around them. The power of the sign fought against the darkness, pressing in, sparks leaping where the 2 forces met. "Get out of her!" he shouted. The laughter that followed was not Lena's. "You cannot unmake what blood has woven. She is our heart now. Strike her, and you strike the swamp itself." Lena's body convulsed. Her small hands clenched into claws. Shadows crawled over her skin like living ink. Geralt knew that whatever the witches had done, they had bound their essence to her. When the barrow fell, destroying them now meant risking her life. "Lena," he said, voice steady despite the roar in his head, "you can fight them. You've done it before. Listen to me. Remember who you are." Her gaze flickered, a moment of clarity breaking through the storm. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she whispered. "Then don't. Push them out. They feed on fear. Deny it. She screamed again, but this time the sound changed. No longer the witch's voices, but her own, defiant and raw. The light in the room flared blinding white. Geralt raised his arms against it. When the glow faded, the hall was still. Lena had collapsed to the floor, unconscious but breathing. The symbols burned into the stone had vanished. Only the smell of blood and smoke remained. Geralt sheathed his sword and knelt beside her, feeling for a pulse. It was faint but steady. He lifted her gently and carried her to one of the side chambers, laying her on a bed. For hours he sat by her side, watching as the color returned to her cheeks. When dawn came, she opened her eyes. "Are they gone?" "For now," he said. She nodded weakly. "I saw them in the dark. They were angry, but then the light came and they burned." "You did that," Geralt said quietly. "You cast them out." "I don't feel them anymore," she murmured, "but I'm scared they'll find me again." "They might try," he admitted, "but next time you'll know how to fight." He left her to rest and stepped outside. The storm had passed. The first light of morning gilded the marshes, turning the pools of water into mirrors of gold. The manor behind him was silent, save for the whisper of wind through its broken windows. Geralt stood at the edge of the courtyard, looking out toward the distant mists. For the first time in weeks, his medallion lay still against his chest, yet he knew that peace in Velen was always borrowed, never earned. He saddled Roach and turned her toward the rising sun. There was nothing more he could do here. The land would heal, or it would not. The Witcher's road lay elsewhere. As he rode away, Lena's voice echoed faintly behind him, soft and uncertain, carried on the morning breeze. "Goodbye, Geralt." He didn't look back. The swamp stretched out across the horizon, silent and still, but deep beneath the water where no light could reach, 3 faint ripples spread outward, slow, deliberate, patient. The ladies of the wood had been banished, not destroyed, and Velen as ever waited for their return. Autumn waned, and Velen's marshes turned to ice. Frost silvered the reeds, and the pools that once stank of decay froze over in thin skins of glass. Crows wheeled through the cold air, their cries echoing over the empty land. Geralt of Rivia rode through it alone, his cloak pulled close against the wind, Roach's breath rising in clouds before her. It had been a month since he had left the manor behind, a month since he had thought, perhaps foolishly, that the witch's hold was broken. Yet peace never lasted long for him, nor for the lands he crossed. Rumors followed him like shadows, a sickness spreading through the villages near the bogs, cattle stillborn, strange lights dancing on the horizon by night. Each tale was the same, a whisper spoken with trembling lips. The ladies are stirring again. He had tried to ignore it. The path called him north, to Kaer Morhen and the long winter. But the dreams would not leave him. Always the same, he walked through black water, the reeds whispering his name, and ahead of him, 3 figures waited beneath a crimson moon. On the 4th night, he woke with his medallion vibrating hard against his chest. That was when he turned Roach back toward Velen. The journey took 3 days. When he returned to Mirkwater, he found the village changed. The fields lay abandoned, the doors of the huts barred with charms of bone and string. Darek, the alderman, was gone. His house stood empty, the roof sagging. Only the tavern still showed signs of life, its chimney coughing weak smoke into the pale sky. Inside, he found a handful of villagers huddled around the hearth. Their faces were drawn and hollow, their eyes full of the quiet dread he knew too well. When they saw him, they crossed themselves, half in hope, half in fear. "Witcher," one muttered, "you've come back. Maybe the gods sent you." "Gods have little to do with it," Geralt said, lowering his hood. "What's happened?" An old woman rose shakily, wringing her hands. "It's the child, Lena. She vanished again. 3 nights passed. The manor's empty. No sign of her, nor of anyone who stayed there. And the swamp. What about the swamp?" She shuddered. "It sings at night. Voices calling. Folk who go near don't come back." Geralt's expression didn't change, but his heart sank. He had feared as much. He left at once, taking the narrow trail that led toward the manor. The air grew colder as he rode. Snow had begun to fall, slow and steady, muting the world in silence. The trees leaned overhead, their branches heavy with ice. When he reached the manor, it was no longer the place he remembered. The roof had collapsed, the walls blackened by fire. The garden was a graveyard of thorns, yet the great oak by the gate still stood, its roots twisting deep into the frozen earth. He dismounted and knelt by the tree. At its base, something had been carved into the bark, a symbol he knew too well. 3 intertwined spirals, the mark of the ladies, fresh, sharp-edged. He drew his sword and whispered a sign of Igni. The rune flared with heat, the bark blackening, but as the mark burned, a faint sound rose from beneath the ground. A moan, long and low, as though the earth itself mourned. "White wolf." The whisper drifted from the shadows of the ruined hall. Geralt turned, sword ready. A figure stood in the doorway, small, thin, barefoot, despite the cold. Lena. Her eyes glowed faintly, pupils swallowed by gold. Snow melted where her feet touched the ground. "Lena," he said softly, "you need to come away from here." She tilted her head, her voice hollow and distant. "You shouldn't have come back. I promised to protect you." "You can't," she said. "They're inside me now. I can feel them waking." The ground trembled beneath them. From the cracks between the stones seeped black water, steaming in the cold air. The reeds that had once filled the manor's gardens rose anew, pushing through the frost like blades. "They want to come back," she whispered. "They said the swamp sleeps, but I am its dream." The witches' voices followed hers, echoing in the wind, 3 tones woven as one. "Did you think death could bind us, Witcher? We are older than death. The child is our vessel. Through her, the swamp breathes again." Geralt stepped forward. "Then I'll free her." "Free her?" The maiden's voice laughed from nowhere and everywhere. "From what? From herself? You can't cut water with a sword." The earth split open and the dark water surged upward, coiling into shapes that became arms, faces, forms of mud and shadow. The witches' silhouettes took shape once more, vast, towering, their eyes burning with a hungry light. "White wolf," hissed the crone. "Will you kill her to save her?" Geralt drew a deep breath. "If I must." The witch's laughter rose, shrill and cruel. "Then let us see if your silver still shines in darkness." The ground erupted. From the mire burst a creature unlike any he had faced before, formed of roots and bone, the twisted corpse of the old barrow idol reborn. Its claws struck like scythes, each blow shaking the ruins. Geralt rolled aside, slashing at its legs. The blade met resistance, half flesh, half stone. He cast Quen, the sign's golden shimmer, flaring around him just as a claw tore through his guard. The impact hurled him backward into the snow. The witches chanted, their voices weaving through the air. Lena's body convulsed. She fell to her knees, clutching her head. "Stop!" she cried. Leave me be! Geralt forced himself to his feet. Fight them! Lena, you've done it before, she screamed. Light burst from her, searing white. The witches recoiled, their forms flickering. The creature hesitated. Geralt seized the moment, leapt forward, and drove his sword into its chest. The silver sank deep, piercing through to whatever passed for its heart. It roared, thrashing wildly, then burst apart into a rain of mud and blood. The light grew brighter, blinding. The witches' cries became shrieks. You can't destroy what the land remembers, they howled. Geralt threw his sword down and gathered the child into his arms. You're stronger than they are. Push them out. I can't, she sobbed. They are me. Then change what you are, he said. Be more. The words struck her like a blow. Her body stiffened, the light inside her turning gold instead of white. The witches screamed as their shadows tore away from her, writhing against the snow. Geralt drew his dagger and traced a circle in the air, murmuring the words of an old sealing rite. The circle flared, and the shadows were dragged toward it, their voices rising in fury. You'll never be rid of us, wolf. The swamp will take her again. Not today, he growled. He plunged the dagger into the ground. The light exploded, swallowing the night. When it faded, the manor was still. Snow fell again, soft and slow. Lena lay in his arms, breathing shallowly. The witches were gone. He carried her outside and laid her on the frozen grass. The dawn was breaking, pale and cold. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. It's over, she whispered. For now, he said. Rest. She smiled faintly and closed her eyes. Geralt stood, his gaze on the horizon where the swamp met the sky. The land was quiet, but beneath the ice he could feel it, the slow heartbeat of the marsh, waiting. The witches were gone, but the memory of them lived on, as eternal as the bog itself. He sheathed his sword, mounted Roach, and turned toward the north. The path awaited. Behind him the frozen reeds whispered in the wind, and if one listened closely, one might almost hear three voices sighing softly, like the last breath of winter. Winter tightened its grip on Velen. The land lay buried beneath frost, the swamps frozen into a silent mirror where even the crows dared not tread. Geralt of Rivia rode northward through the bleak countryside, his cloak heavy with snow, the edges of his silver sword crusted with rime. The path was quiet save for the creak of Roach's tack and the whisper of wind in the pines. Days had passed since the battle at the manor, yet his mind had not found rest. The witches were gone, banished by Lena's light and his blade, but he knew too well that evil in Velen never truly died. It merely sank deeper, waiting. His medallion still quivered faintly each dawn, as if remembering the echoes of their voices. He had intended to leave the swamps behind for good. He had told himself that the child was safe, that the land could heal without him. But the Witcher's instincts were old, sharpened by countless hunts, and they whispered otherwise. The silence that now lay upon Velen was too deep, too complete, like the hush after a storm that had only paused to draw breath again. He came upon a small village at the edge of the marshes, half a dozen huts, huddled against the cold, smoke rising weakly from one chimney. The people looked at him as though he were a ghost, and perhaps in their minds he was. When he dismounted before the tavern, a thin man in a wool cloak hurried out to meet him, his face pale with fear. "Witcher," the man said, bowing his head, "you came just in time. Something's happened at the river. The ice broke, though there's been no thaw."
And he swallowed. "We found bones. Not old ones. Fresh. Geralt followed the man through the snow. The village stood near a narrow river that fed into the wider marsh. The ice there was cracked in a circle, as though something beneath had burst through. Around the edges, streaks of black mud stained the snow. The Witcher knelt, brushing aside the frost with gloved fingers. The bones were indeed fresh, pale and slick, gnawed clean. He frowned. Animal tracks? The villager shook his head. None, only these. He pointed to the ground where faint marks coiled across the snow, spirals carved by something sharp, as if the earth itself had been scored by claws. Geralt recognized them at once, the sign of the ladies. He rose slowly. You've been hearing anything strange at night? The man hesitated. Voices, singing sometimes, like children in the fog. We stay indoors now when the moon's up. Geralt's hand tightened on his sword hilt. The witches were stirring again, but not as before. They had been bound to the land, tied to the swamp's heart, but now that heart was broken. Whatever had awakened beneath the ice was something new, a remnant of their power left adrift and hungry. He sent the villager back and made camp by the river bank. That night, under a bruised sky, he waited. The moon rose full and pale. Frost clung to his beard, his breath misting before him. Hours passed, and then faintly he heard it, the same song that had haunted his dreams. White wolf, come to the water. The ice shifted. Cracks spread like veins across its surface, and from the dark below came a light, green and sickly. Geralt drew his silver sword and stood ready. The ice burst apart. A shape rose from the depths, cloaked in mud and bone. It was tall as a man, but thin as a reed. Its limbs jointed wrong, its eyes two pits of green fire. It hissed softly, the sound like the whisper of the swamp reeds. A drowned wraith, perhaps. One born not of a single death, but of many. The witch's power made flesh again. Geralt moved as it lunged. The sword flashed, cutting through the air, striking its chest. The blade bit deep, but met little resistance. The creature dissolved into mist and reformed behind him. He spun, casting Erden, the violet circle flaring to life beneath his boots. The wraith shrieked as its form solidified, bound by the sign's magic. Geralt struck again, driving his sword through its chest. For a heartbeat, it was still. Then, from its mouth, a voice spoke, not its own, but a chorus of three. We told you, wolf. The swamp remembers. He wrenched the blade free, cleaving downward. The wraith fell, breaking apart like ice into water. The green glow faded. When it was done, Geralt stood alone by the river, the world silent once more. The ice began to freeze again over the black water, sealing what lay beneath. He cleaned his blade and sheathed it, though his thoughts were grim. The witch's power lingered, scattered but not dead. The land itself carried their memory, as if the soil had tasted their magic and found it sweet. The next morning he rode toward the manor. Snow had covered the ruins completely, but the oak tree still stood, its bare branches heavy with frost. At its base, he found something new, a circle of flowers, fresh and blue, growing impossibly through the snow. He knelt, brushing them with his gloved fingers. They were warm to the touch, alive with faint light. Behind him a voice spoke. You came back? He turned. Lena stood among the trees, wrapped in a cloak too large for her small frame. Her cheeks were pale, but her eyes were clear now, no longer gold, but human once more. I had to be sure, Geralt said. She nodded slowly. They're gone. I don't hear them anymore. But sometimes when I sleep, I see the swamp in my dreams. The water moves, it listens.
Geralt straightened. That's the price of surviving Velen. The land never forgets. The girl looked at the flowers. They grew after the snow came.
I don't know how. He studied them a moment, then said, maybe the land remembers you too, and it's grateful. She smiled faintly. Will you stay? He shook his head. No. The path calls. She lowered her gaze, hiding her disappointment. Then I'll keep the flowers alive, so you'll have something good to remember this place by. Geralt's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. Do that. And if the swamp whispers again, don't listen. He mounted Roach and turned toward the north. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and frost, a clean smell that spoke of distance and new roads. As he rode, the sky lightened to gray, then to silver. The Witcher did not look back, but far behind him, where the manor had once stood, the flowers swayed in the cold wind, glowing softly, and deep beneath the frozen marsh, where their earth met the still heart of the swamp, a faint ripple stirred, slow, patient, eternal. The ladies were gone, yet their memory had taken root in the land. The swamp slept again, but even in sleep it dreamed. Spring crept slowly into Velen, like a thief too timid to enter the house. The snows melted, and the black earth drank deeply of the thaw. Here and there the marsh waters stirred again, alive with frogs and the quiet hum of gnats. Yet though the land seemed to wake from its long sleep, the air held a tension, subtle but unmistakable. The villagers whispered that the swamps still dreamed of the witches. Geralt of Rivia had long since left Mirkwater behind, following the path northward through Rinde and the war-scarred plains beyond. But the ghosts of Velen clung to him like the stench of its mud. His medallion still thrummed faintly each dawn, and at times when night was deepest, he thought he heard the echo of a child's voice carried on the wind. He tried to forget. He hunted drowners by the Pontar, slew a cursed wyvern near Oxenfurt, and took work where he could. Yet every dream returned to the same place, the Barrow Hill and its silent waters, the pale child standing at its edge, whispering words that chilled him even in sleep. On the fourth night of such dreams, he turned back south. The roads were muddy, the rivers swollen with spring rain. When he reached the outskirts of Velen again, the land seemed changed, warmer, greener, yet uneasy. He passed burnt wagons and broken shrines, offerings left to rot. It was as though the people no longer knew whom to fear or to pray to. At last, he came to the manor by the swamp. The ruins still stood, half buried in moss, the oak tree spreading its branches above. Beneath it, the circle of blue flowers bloomed again, brighter than before, and beside them, kneeling in the grass, was Lena. She was older now, though only by months. Yet something in her gaze made her seem years beyond her age. Her hair had grown long, pale as milk, and her eyes, when she turned them on him, gleamed faintly with a light he could not name. "You came back," she said softly. "I had to see for myself." She smiled faintly. "I thought I'd only dreamed you after all. The other said the Witcher never stays. The path doesn't leave room for staying." He looked around, studying the ruins. "How long have you been here alone?" "I'm not alone," she said. "The land speaks now. Not in words, but in feelings. I know when it rains before the clouds come. I know where the deer hide when the fish wake." Geralt frowned. "That's no gift from men." She lowered her gaze. "I know. The witches left something behind. Their power didn't die. It sank into the soil, and some of it into me." He stepped closer. "And you? Are you afraid?" She shook her head.
No, I thought I would be, but the swamp doesn't whisper anymore. It listens. Sometimes it even answers. He crouched beside her, examining the flowers. You're certain they're gone? They're gone, she said. But their dreams remain. I see them when I sleep. The women they once were before the swamp twisted them. They weren't always monsters. Geralt said nothing. He had seen too many evils born of pain, too many souls warped by sorrow. Still, he felt the weight of her words. The line between monster and victim isn't as straight as people think, he murmured. Lena looked up at him, her expression unreadable. Do you think I'll become like them? No, he said after a long pause. You've already made a choice. They never could. She smiled then, faintly, though sadness lingered behind it. Then I'll keep tending the swamp. Someone must. It's part of me now. He rose, looking toward the distant horizon. Velen needs its witch. Just a different kind. She laughed softly, the sound light as rain on leaves. Then I'll be that. A good witch. He nodded once, though his mind was far away. The wind rustled through the reeds, carrying with it the scent of water and spring earth. Later, when evening came, they sat by the oak tree, watching the sun sink over the marshes. The light painted the pools in gold and crimson, the reeds bending like dancers in the wind. I used to hate this place, Lena said quietly. The darkness, the smell. Now it feels alive, it breathes. The swamp always breathes, Geralt replied. Most folk just don't notice until it's too late. She glanced at him. Will you stay the night? He hesitated, then nodded. One night. They built a small fire by the tree. Geralt cooked what little they had, rabbit and roots boiled in a pot. The warmth of the flames glowed against the twilight, and for a moment the marsh seemed almost peaceful. When the stars rose, Lena spoke again. Do you ever stop? Traveling, hunting, fighting? Not while I live, he said. Then it's a hard life. It's the one I have. Silence fell between them, companionable and deep. Somewhere far off, an owl called. The reeds whispered softly in the night breeze. Geralt leaned back, gazing up at the stars. You'll be safe here for a while, but if you ever hear their voices again, I'll remember what you taught me, she interrupted. Fear feeds them. I won't give them that. He studied her for a moment. The firelight flickered across her face, and he saw there both fragility and strength. Whatever the witches had left behind in her, it was no longer their curse. It had become her own kind of power. At dawn, he prepared to leave. Lena met him by the tree, the blue flowers shining at her feet. You'll come back? She asked. He adjusted Roach's saddle. Maybe. The path is long. She nodded. Then I'll keep the swamp safe until you do. He mounted and looked down at her. The world's full of monsters, Lena, but it's not the monsters that frighten me. It's how easily we become them. I know, she said quietly. That's why I won't. He gave her a last nod and rode away. The mist closed behind him, the sound of her voice fading into the wind. For a long while he rode without looking back. Only when the hills rose before him and the marsh lay distant behind did he slow and glance over his shoulder. The morning sun touched the land in light, and far away the oak tree gleamed against the horizon. For the first time in many years, he allowed himself a thought he rarely dared. Perhaps in this broken world, some wounds could heal. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of lilac and marsh bloom. Geralt smiled faintly, tugged his cloak closer, and rode northward, the path stretching endlessly before him. Behind him, Velen slept at last, its dreams no longer cruel but watchful. And beneath the earth, in the deep roots of the swamp, the last echo of the witches' voices faded into silence, leaving only the quiet heartbeat of a land that at long last had begun to forgive. The road carried Geralt far from Velen, through woods just greening and fields still black with the damp of spring. Yet the memory of the marshes clung to him as stubbornly as the smell of peat and blood that no washing could quite remove. Each dawn, when he broke camp and saddled Roach, the world seemed a little less gray, and yet something of the swamp's silence followed him still, its strange, brooding patience, as if it waited for his return. Weeks passed. The path took him west, where rumor spoke of drowners haunting the fords near Wizima. He slew them, took his coin, and moved on. He fought a Leshen in a pine grove, cut down ghouls that gnawed at a battlefield's bones, mended his armor, and forgot to rest. Yet the nights remained restless. In his dreams he heard water whispering through reeds and saw a pale face floating just beneath the surface. Lena's, calm and watchful, neither alive nor dead. When he woke, the sound of her voice still lingered. On the 23rd day, he crossed paths with a band of Nilfgaardian deserters, men hollow-eyed and starving. They told him tales of villages drowned without rain, of wells that turned black overnight. The swamps spreading, one of them muttered, shivering though the sun was warm. Things moving under the water again, like the land's alive. Geralt said nothing, but unease stirred in his gut. He finished his meal, left them by the road, and turned Roach toward the south once more. When he reached Velen, the land looked older than before. The trees had burst into leaf, yet the color seemed duller, the sky a little dimmer, as though light itself feared to linger there. The village of Mirkwater was nearly empty now. He found only a few families left, tending what fields hadn't yet gone sour. They remembered him, of course. Every village remembered its witcher. "You'll find the girl at the manor," one woman said, her face half hidden in a kerchief. "She keeps to herself, talks to the wind. Some say she's cursed, others that she's blessed. Either way, she's not like us anymore." He rode at once to the old manor hill. The road was overgrown with grass and nettles, but the air smelled clean, washed by recent rain. When he reached the gate, he saw the oak tree first. It had grown wide and strong, its roots spreading deep through the earth, its branches full of life. Beneath it, a figure stood barefoot in the mud, her hair pale as sunlight through fog. "Lena," he called. She turned and smiled. "I knew you'd come back. The swamp told me." He dismounted, tying Roach to the fence. "I heard the land was stirring again. The people were vanishing." She nodded. "The witches are gone, but their shadow lingers. The marsh remembers them. It always will. You feel it?" "I feel everything now," she said simply. "The roots beneath my feet, the pulse of the water. The swamp doesn't hunger anymore, it grows. It wants balance, not blood." He studied her closely. She stood straight and strong, her skin pale but warm, her eyes bright. There was power in her still, but not the kind that stank of corruption. It was older, wilder, and strangely clean. "What have you done here?" he asked. "I've been healing it," she said. "Where the witches fed on pain, I've given peace. The people come sometimes. They ask for blessings, for luck in the planting. I help them when I can. Like a priestess. Like a witch, she said with a faint smile. The word no longer carried fear. They walked together along the water's edge. The marsh was quiet, the pools calm and clear, the reeds whispering softly. Small white flowers bloomed where once only rot had reigned. "It's different," Geralt said. "The air feels cleaner." "The swamp wanted to live," Lena said. "It only needed to remember how." He looked out over the water. "You've changed too." "I had to," she said. "The witches gave me their curse. You helped me turn it into something else." He nodded slowly. "You've done well." For a time they stood in silence, watching the sun drift low over the horizon. Then Lena said, "I still hear them sometimes." Not their voices, just echoes, like waves on distant water. They're not angry anymore. I think they've finally slept. Geralt's gaze lingered on her. "You sure you don't want to leave this place?" "This is where I belong," she said. "Someone has to watch over the swamp. It's part of me now, and I'm part of it." He accepted that with a small nod. "If trouble comes again, I'll call," she said, "and the wolf will come." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. Perhaps. The evening deepened. Fireflies rose from the grass, their lights glimmering like fallen stars. Lena turned back toward the manor, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked at peace. Geralt lingered a while longer, watching the reflections ripple across the water. He thought of the witches, of the bargain that had started it all, of the lives lost and the land scarred. It had cost too much, as most victories did. Yet in that stillness beneath the whispering reeds, he felt something stir, a quiet promise that perhaps not all battles were in vain. He mounted Roach and looked back once. Lena stood beneath the oak, her face upturned to the fading light. The swamp glowed faintly around her as though the land itself breathed in rhythm with her heart. "Goodbye, girl," he said softly. She lifted a hand, smiling through the dusk. "Goodbye, Witcher." He rode north until night fell, the marsh receding behind him, swallowed by shadow. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and bright. The path stretched on, endless as ever, yet lighter beneath his boots. Somewhere behind him, the swamp murmured like a sleeping giant, its dreams gentle now. And though Geralt knew he would never see that cursed land again, he also knew that Velen would endure, that the balance, fragile and hard won, would hold for a while longer. For even in a world where monsters were born every day, sometimes, just sometimes, the darkness could be taught to sleep. And so the Witcher rode on beneath the stars, the wind in his hair, the ghosts of the swamps at last, falling silent.